Thank you everyone for dropping in. So I work for the Act Along Commit in Denmark, and I'm really going to go down to the basics, the very fundamentals of Act Along Commit. I'm going to talk a little bit about mental health promotion. I'm going to talk about what it is that we see useful in Act Along Commit. I'm going to talk about some of these challenges that people face, normal people, what they might, the challenges that people face in terms of their mental health. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the way we do Act Along Commit in Denmark. And then I'm going to talk about the more broader perspective of mental health promotion. So I want to start with just taking a definition of mental health from the World Health Organization. And it says that mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. All right, so the first thing you notice is that it's all emphasizing the positive. It's not talking about the absence of symptoms of mental disorder. The second thing you might notice is that if you think about your own life and what makes it worth living, and if you think about these components there, then you'll find that as well in here somewhere. I imagine that you find it there. And then I want to say that mental health is not a state that is perfect, a static, perfect state. Sometimes mental health is a little bit like that, like a pleasant dream. Everything works out the way we like it to. And sometimes it's a little bit like that, because none of us are immune to the vulnerabilities of life. And life is unpredictable. It's a very unpredictable place to be on Earth. And people are unpredictable, situations are unpredictable, and we have to somehow navigate through that. Here's a McDonald's sign from the US that survived one of your hurricanes. And as you can see, it's been through a rough storm, but still standing. And this is something about resilience. It's about the resources and the foundation that makes it able to still stand and show the way to a Happy Meal. All right? And this is also about mental health, being able to cope with the normal stresses of life. It's about resources. It's about a foundation. So let's go on and talk about what are these factors that we talk about a lot in Act Along Commit. And one is everyday activities. We know from decades of research that it's good for us to have a number of activities, recreational activities and so forth, that we can do during our everyday life. And variety is key. It's good to have a number of different types of activities that we can do throughout a week. And the same actually goes for people. It's good for us to engage with different types of people in our life. Some friends, some family, some coworkers, some fellow students, some neighbors, one or two here or there. It's all about balance and variety. That's what matters. And of course, what we know is that being inactive is very bad for our mental health. And then, of course, there's the opposite side of the coin, which is being incredibly active. But what people sometimes tend to do is that they're incredibly active in one domain. And sometimes that's called work. Sometimes it's called, I heard someone talk about sports, being too engaged in sports. We humans, we can be too engaged in pretty much anything. And I usually say that if there's only one source of meaning in your life, then that's an alarm bell, and you need to watch out. It's important that we have different sources of meaning. And if we're willing to pay with our mind and our body and our soul for one thing that we think is really important, then that's a bad sign, and that will lead to burnout and depression and who knows what else. So balance. Now, when we do research, then what we have found is that we ask people about what creates mental health. And like Rob talked about yesterday, people, they intuitively know what's good for their mental health. We ask them, and they have to reflect about it a little bit. And then they come along, and they're like, oh, it's something about keeping active, being with others, doing something that matters. But what happens often is that people, they forget to prioritize these things. They have done it earlier. They can recall things that they have done that gave them enjoyment, meaning. But then when people are stressed, then they become depressed, then the first things to go is people's recreational activities and the people they see. It's the first thing they let go of. Possibly because of a lack of information. They don't know that these things are so important for mental health. We tend to think of them as, oh, it's just a hobby. It's just something I do once in a while. No. Going to that handball group or whatever you do is really important for your mental health, to maintain good mental health, to enhance your mental health. So if we don't prioritize our own mental health, where we might end up eventually is somewhere like this girl calls home to her mother and says, I just feel lost. I don't know if anyone of you can recognize that. I can. I've been there myself. Or you might end up like this cow who's just looking out into this horizon, and I imagine thinking, what's the point of it all? Maybe. So what to do when you're there, if you get there someday? Well, I mean, the usual standard approach is, well, you need to talk to a professional. And yes, maybe you need to. Sometimes that's necessary. But people should have more options. And people should know that there are things that they can do themselves for their own mental health. So I like to talk about something that I call a healthy distraction. Basically, it's when I talk about helping people to recover from different things, and I usually say that when you take away something negative, you have to fill in with something positive. And I like this one. I took a picture of that. Do more things that make you forget to check your phone. I use that as an indicator for myself, because I know that when I'm very engaged and passionate about something, I forget to check my phone. That works. And sometimes, mental health problems, we don't have to always pathologize everything. Sometimes mental health problems can be a little bit like a long, bad cold. And sometimes we just have to wait it through. And then meanwhile, we have to do what we can to make the body and the brain most likely to be able to fight it and come out on the other side. Sometimes that's what we need to do. And there's research, a lot of research that shows that activities matter. There's research that shows that just something as basic as climbing a wall can be effective to relieve depressive symptoms. People with mild and moderate depression, tell them to climb a wall 3 times a week. It works to relieve depressive symptoms. It sounds crazy, but it does. And these authors who did this study, they say that the reason is because that you have to use a lot of cognitive resources to stay on this wall and know where you put your foot and your hand and all this. And when you're doing that, well, you can't at the same time think about how little you have to live for or whatever it is that you might be worried about, because you're using your brain power to do this stuff. And what happens for some, not all, but for some, is that the brain is simply sort of responding like, oh, so we're not thinking about this anymore. We're not worrying about this anymore. Well, then I'll move on. And then somehow we forget these things that we're worried about, and then we're okay. So that can really make a difference to keep active in various ways. Some elements of human behavior that we should remember that we have in our system. Curiosity, not just polar bears like this one, but also human beings. We are curious by nature. You can observe an infant, and they'll touch anything they get near to. They want to touch everything. They want to taste everything. They're crazy. It's because they're curious. But then as people grow up, sometimes, and maybe too often, something tragic happens that people, they sort of let go of curiosity, or they forget to be curious. They forget to learn new things, even though that this is something that is naturally rewarding for us to do. We have a need to contribute. It's because we are social creatures. We need to be part of something. Actually, we need to be needed. My grandma, she was completely convinced that her son, my uncle, could not function without her. Even though she was older, couldn't do a lot of things. He could do so much more than her, but she believed that he could not function without her. And then one day he passed away because of illnesses. And just a few days later, she passed away because there was no more need for her. That's how I interpret it. And there are many stories like this, not just my grandma, because we need to be needed. It's important for our survival, for our thriving. We all need to contribute in some way. Competences and skills. When you get involved socially, do something like volunteering or whatever, you can learn new skills and get new competences. This is important. This brings positive emotions. And a lot of you, probably all of you, have a lot of skills. There are a lot of people that don't have it. So helping a person to get a skill, just one skill, can make a very big difference. It can be the difference that keeps a person alive. And whether we have skills or not, then almost for all people in general, learning something new gives us positive emotions. Destination. We all need to know somehow where we're going in life. I'm not saying that we have to have everything planned out. Many of my plans, they didn't work out the way I thought. But I always had a concept, an idea, a direction, somewhere where I wanted to end up. And people need that. They need that sense of direction. But how do we get it? How do we find it? Well, sometimes we have to open up our world to others, and we have to do new things to get an idea of where can you end up in the first place, and then decide. Destination is key to mental health. And then there's the social dimension. And the social dimension is very, very, very important. We are social creatures. It's stuff that we don't notice. If you ever had this experience that one of your friends was yawning, and then you get the urge to yawn yourself. This happens. This can be observed scientifically. It's because there's a bond between people that we can't see, but it's there. And I'm very tempted to say that the belong dimension is more important than the two other ones. And at the same time, they're all interconnected. So I don't really want to say it, and then at the same time, I want to say it because it's fundamental. The social dimension is fundamental. And to sort of make that point, I want to take you a little bit back in time, actually sort of to the beginnings. And this famous historian here, he said that when a society or a civilization perishes, one condition may always be found. They forgot where they came from. And I think this applies to mental health as well, because we see a steady decline in mental health all over the world. Depression is now the leading burden of disability on Earth. Then comes cancer, some other diseases. Number 6, anxiety. So we have a huge problem with mental health problems in the world. And this is a pack of wolves. Not to say that we descend from wolves, but we descend from people that had the same conditions as a pack of wolves outside of civilization. And I watch the Nature Channel. I think it's amazing to look at how these animals live and behave. And when you watch the Nature Channel, you'll notice that they're sort of like, in these packs of animals, there are two forces. One is a force for status, hierarchies. They're in all these different animal packs. And then there's another force called collective survival. And you'll notice that when animals, they get disconnected from their pack, then the risk for death it increases dramatically. They're very unlikely to make it on their own. And how does this relate to us? Well, we're the same. We haven't changed. Take loneliness. What is loneliness? People can come with some definitions, say, it's a subjective experience of feeling disconnected. Well, I'll tell you what loneliness is. It's a reaction. It's a reaction to feeling disconnected from a pack. And it's all the way down, ingrained in our brain. You can't get a new brain. The brain reacts when you start to be disconnected from your social circle, from your community. Your autonomous nervous system will react. It will affect your physiology. That's why we see such a strong correlation between loneliness and health or disease. So it's really important to be part of a group and feel a belonging to a community. And when you start to feel disconnected, then your brain is saying, hey, you got to keep alert now. Watch out. You might die from this if you're not careful. That's what's going on. But then here we are in a civilization. The brain is the same, but we live in a civilized world. And things might seem a little bit different. And what has happened now? I want to take maybe an example that we call social media. And I don't want to blame social media for the mental health problems. It's maybe partly to blame, but it receives a lot of criticism. I think that the decline we see in mental health globally, we already started to see alarming trajectories well before social media. But then 2006, there was a brief period where social media made everything better. And that was just before the very long, still ongoing period where social media made everything worse. And the thing about social media is that, well, it's not harmful to our mental health if we use it in a mentally healthy way. If we use it in a way where we connect with other people, real people, social interaction, real social interaction, then it can be really good for mental health. Unfortunately, that's rarely what happens. Usually what happens is that people use it in a way where it's like a drug, and it works like a drug. Every time you post something, you get a like, your brain reacts to it because your brain is ingrained to notice attention. That's a like, that's attention, and attention means status, and status means survival, so it rewards you for attention. But for too many people, it becomes a drug. And it's the way that most people use it, what I can see, is for self-promotion. Actually, I dislike this term social media so much because I think it conveys the wrong thing. It conveys that it helps us to connect. So I was thinking about this last night when I couldn't sleep anyway, and then I came up with this thing. Let's stop calling it social media. Let's just call it media. Yeah? Let's call it that, because now it really makes sense. This is what it's all about, media, okay? And let's take selfies. This is an exaggerated photo, maybe. Here's a paper that came out about selfies, and they look at the association between selfies and deaths, or reported deaths, in relation to a selfie. Because some people, they are so hell-bent on getting the perfect selfie, they will go all the way under the waterfall, or at the end of a very tall building to get that perfect shot. 259 deaths globally due to a selfie from 2011 to 2017. And maybe this is not a lot compared to cancer, but it's a lot when you think about that this was an unknown phenomenon. It never happened before. And I mean, if I was a person who lost a brother or relative to a selfie, I don't even know how I would begin to make sense of that. That's just weird and tragic. So I think this is just to show how extreme it goes, this self-promotion sort of thing. Then there's a study that came out, I think last year, or in 2017, by Cacioppo. He was a guru in loneliness research. And I think maybe this was his last paper before he passed away. But it shows that loneliness and self-centeredness appear to be mutually reinforcing. So they reinforce each other. What might this mean? Well, if we want to disrupt this relationship between those two, maybe what we need to do is look out. Instead of being self-centered, look to our social connections, look to the community around us. Maybe that can actually help protect against this kind of stuff. So orientation. Your ego is not your amigo. It just spoke to me. Good thing to keep in mind. It's really not, it doesn't help us if it's doing the wrong thing. It's there as a survival mechanism because, of course, to survive, we have to take ourselves first. But that's how much power it should have, and probably not so much more than that. So newsflash, you are here, part of a system that doesn't revolve around you, around me, but we revolve around a perfect system in perfect balance. We're all part of that system. We all have to be part of that system and contribute to that system. So what to do then? Become part of a crew. I don't think I ever wanted to become part of a group more than when I saw this picture. So, and just to say something about behaviors and mental states, because it's not just about you, it's about everyone around you. Because we know from research that behaviors and mental states, they spread from person to person. And this is bad news. Depression, loneliness, anxiety, rudeness, risk behaviors, obesity, divorce, suicide, they all spread from person to person. When one person becomes depressed, all the ones around you are more likely to become depressed. You can see that. It's bad news. The good news, same goes for positive emotions and behaviors. Happiness, laughter, exercise, altruism, concentration, smoking cessation, productivity, pregnancy. That last one you got to be careful with. You know, when your colleagues start to become pregnant, that's when you need to think about a sabbatical. Maybe far, far away on a deserted island. But this is incredible because behaviors, they spread all the way from where they make a life to where they end it. Incredible. So you can be part of making that difference when you do something positive. When you engage in a mental healthy activity, it doesn't just affect you, but you're also actually improving the community without doing it really consciously, but it makes a difference. So let's talk about the ABCs of mental health. You already know the domains, but I like to take in Elvis because he said it so well. Not because he was a perfect example of good mental health, but just because of his words. A little less conversation, a little more action. And what is our focus? What is our psychological orientation in the Act Alone Commit? Well, we have a focus on behaviors. So there are different orientations. Some orientations, they say that, well, in order to change your mental health, you have to go down in the subconscious and work with it. And then there are other orientations that say that, well, if you want to change your mental health, you have to change your mindset, or the way you think about things, and then change your behavior, and then you can change the way you feel. None of these are wrong. They all have a part of the truth. But what we say is that behavior determines your mental health, and you can change your mental health by changing your behavior. If you engage in mentally healthy activities, you become mentally healthy. Too often there's this attitude that mental health status, there's like a unidirectional relationship to behaviors, lifestyles, participation, community. So, well, if you have a mental health problem, too bad. Then maybe you can't participate so much in this and that. But we know from so much research that it just equally goes the opposite way. You can change your mental health by changing your behavior. You have a lot of power yourself. So mental health promotion, this is what we're all about. And Act Along Commit is one way to do mental health promotion. So this is a normal distribution. Most people, they are somewhere in the middle, have moderate mental health. Then some, they're not doing so well, languishing. Some have a mental illness. And then some are up here in the green area, flourishing. And what we're trying to do is to push everyone to that right side, the whole population. That's what we're interested in. What is the sort of like the standard approach usually is to focus on this part and then prevent mental disorders from developing. That's all good. That's good. We have to do that. But a limitation might be that if we only focus on risk groups and destigmatization and so forth, we might only achieve to keep people here. But how do we get everyone to the other side? That's what we're trying to do. And if you are languishing, then you are 6 times more likely to develop depression at a later time point compared to those that are here flourishing. If you are in the middle, you're 3 times more likely to develop depression at a later time point compared to those that are flourishing. Some of the research we've been doing, we've shown that if you volunteer, then you are twice as likely to be here, flourishing, as compared to people that don't volunteer. And this sort of goes both ways, I think. It's bidirectional, a little bit like sport. If you have a lot of energy, then you're more likely to engage in sport. But also, if you engage in sport, you're more likely to get more energy to be able to do that. Some of the research we're doing at the moment, we're looking at very big data, European data, over 12 different countries in Europe. And then it's longitudinal data, and we're looking at social participation. So different kinds of participation, volunteering, participating in sports, participating in civic engagement, religion, different types. And then what we show is that it protects against mental health problems 5 years later. That's one study we're doing. Another study, we're using the same data, but what we're doing in that study is that we show that when people socially participate, then it protects against the development of chronic physical illnesses 5 years later. And this is what we call a mediation analysis. So we explain this association between A and B. So how do we explain the association between social participation, doing something, and then chronic illnesses at a later time point? And the way what we figure out is that it can be explained by enhanced mental health. Not all of it, but a lot of it can be explained by enhanced mental health, meaning that when you participate socially, that it improves your mental health, it reduces depressive symptoms, it increases your quality of life, and by extension, it protects against the development of chronic illnesses. Some of the stuff we're doing now. There's one more study I want to tell you about. This is EPIC. So I want you to hold on to your chair or the table or the person next to you, because I'm going to blow you away with what I'm going to say now. All right? But we're doing a study on mental health economics. And what has previously been done is looking at mental illness, people with mental illness. What are the costs to society for people with mental illness? That's been done before, quite a number of times. And it costs a lot. It's a problem. But what has not been done is looking at everyone behind this line of flourishing. And what are the extra healthcare costs associated with these people compared to the people that are here in optimal mental health, to the healthcare sector? And we're talking about costs to GPs, specialists, costs of hospitalizations, outpatient treatment, and also transfers insurance transfers. And Denmark is a small country, population of 5 million people. And what we find with this study is that these people here, 1.7 billion US dollars per year for Denmark in extra healthcare costs for these people compared to these people. 1.7 billion US dollars per year. Now that's been not published yet, so you're going to have to be a little bit patient with it. Might take a year, I hope. But now imagine, a little bit utopian here, but imagine that we were really good at doing Act, Belong, Commit. And not just that, but also other strategies to improve mental health and prevent mental disorders. Imagine that we were really good and we could manage to get everyone in the community pushed all the way up here to flourishing. Imagine how much money that could be saved from that. And that would be a secondary jackpot, not the primary one, because the primary one would be that everyone is doing better, is happier and healthier. That's the primary outcome. The secondary outcome, we could save a hell of a lot of money. And that's very interesting. I want to talk a little bit about taboo associated with mental illnesses, because destigmatization campaigns, they're important. But I don't think, and that's just my theory, but I don't think we will ever get to a place in society where people are just completely okay with talking about their mental health problems. So these interventions, they should definitely be there. But I want to talk about the Act, Belong, Commit, because what we know is that it's really destigmatizing for people that have mental health problems, because the whole program is not designed for them. It's not this little vulnerable group that are burdened and that need our help, and then they have to do this. But it's for everyone. Act, Belong, Commit is for everyone, and that works for people that have mental health problems, because mental health is everybody's business. And this is one of your trauma experts here in the US. Just to bring a quote from him, he says, "The most therapeutic experiences do not take place in therapy, but in naturally occurring healthy relationships." And that's not to say that we shouldn't do therapy. He's a therapist himself. But what he's saying is that, well, in therapy, patients are helped, but you want to see that translated into real-world social interactions. And we can do a lot to bring this about as well in our community by using, for example, Act, Belong, Commit. So what is the ABC? Sometimes people have a little bit difficulty understanding what is ABC, because ABC is a lot of things. So I'm going to try to spell it out. One, it's a campaign. With this campaign, we're trying to create a new mindset about mental health. That people, they are in power, they can do a lot of things for their own mental health, and it's important to prioritize your own mental health. And here are some simple principles how to improve your mental health. Then it's also a model or a framework for doing mental health promotion. That is what this Mental Health Summit is all about. It's not just about using the principles ourselves, but it's about how do we actually do mental health promotion in the communities. And then lastly, and this is very important, it's a partnership. And the reason I'm saying this is really important is because it's not enough to just tell people what they need to do. People are like donkeys. They don't like to change their behavior. So we have to make an environment, a community that reinforces the behaviors that we're telling them that they have to do. This is behavioral economics. You have to make it as easy and simple as possible for people to change their behaviors, what we'd like them to do. Otherwise, they will not do it. So we have to have a partnership, intersectoral, interdisciplinary, where everyone works together to create the best conditions for people to actually be able to do Act, Belong, Commit. And that's very, very important. So in Denmark, we have a partnership of more than 20 different municipalities and still counting. And then we have a lot of different NGOs, organizations. For example, we have the sports associations. And the sports associations, they already do something active. That's their thing. So what can they do? Well, they can do a lot. And what they've been working with is, well, we do a lot of ACT. How can we turn up the belong and the commit here? And if you ever tried to maybe go to a class or something, whatever it might be, yoga class or tennis or something with a group, and then you go in there, you do the exercise or whatever it might be, and then you leave again. But you leave with an empty feeling because no one has asked your name. Everyone is just talking with each other, and, well, maybe you won't come back because it wasn't really your cup of tea. Well, you can work with this. Yeah? So they use a lot of material to try to instruct their trainers to, for example, pick one person who has to go and say hello to new people and talk to them. It's a few things. Hello, how are you doing? What's your name? What do you do for a living? Where do you live? Okay, great. Kids, dog, great. All right, so the person is seen. And then also a goodbye. All right, hope to see you next time. This is the kind of stuff that makes people, it gives them a good feeling when they leave, and it makes them more likely to return. It seems so basic, but still, this is what it can do. So here's a door to the psychiatry in Denmark. I walked past this, I took it. I took this picture because who has the responsibility to treat mental illness? Well, when someone develops mental illness, then the responsibility to treat is firmly placed within the healthcare sector. But what about before someone develops a diagnosable disorder? Who has the responsibility to promote their mental health and well-being? Well, then the answer is not so straightforward, because then it's everyone throughout community that has the responsibility. It's our schools, it's our workplaces, it's our universities, it's our parks, it's our streets, it's our fast food chains, our grocery stores, everything throughout society. Everyone has a role to play. And I guess the same can be said about at a university. Who has a responsibility before that person walks through that door to the university council and says, I think I might have a problem? Well, it's everyone's business. Everyone has to do their part. Everyone has to lift everyone else up. And then I want to talk a little bit about the happiness trap. It's just this, I think a lot of people, they have this idea that happiness is like some perfect state that they're going to attain one day when they do this and this and this. And then one day they do it all, and then they're disappointed because it wasn't really all that. And they thought it was going to be a static thing, and then they were just going to be perfect from then on. And usually that's not what happens. Maybe the answer is more simple. Maybe sort of the key to happiness is doing things that you find enjoyable and meaningful, and then finding enjoyment and meaning in the things you do. Maybe it's just something like that. So, but just to take what some influential people or intelligent thinkers have said about happiness, one from one of your presidents, happiness lies in the joy of achievement and the thrill of creative effort. Two, happiness is something that multiplies when divided. I like this one because it goes against basic algebra. You can't multiply it and divide at the same time, but with people you can. When you share your happiness with others, then it becomes stronger. And happiness happens on the way to fulfillment. If you ever had this experience of being excited about the process of achieving something, and then finally you achieve it, and then actually the excitement was not as big as the process of it. Ring a bell? Oh wait, it's Yankville on commit, isn't it? Wow. All right, how about the goal of education? Most of you probably know this quote. We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. How to get character? I'm a researcher myself, and I'd like to think that I'm doing more than just analyzing some data and then publishing research. I'd like to think that I could play a more important role. So what should be the outcome of academics? Well, I'd say first off, initiative. You see a problem, and then you take steps to addressing it. Make a meaningful difference. You see the problem, and you find a solution for it. Something that could be measured and seen, observed. And then contribution to community. it should be translated into a difference in the real world where people live, whether it's your local community, your nation, the global community, or even the community of planets in our universe. Something that contributes and makes this whole place a better place. But how do you do that? I think most people who have achieved this, it didn't just come out of a vacuum. You got to start somewhere. You got to start in the small. How do you do it? Well, act, belong, commit, isn't it? So a little bit about belong. We know that people, they develop their close social connections early in life. And then as they enter adulthood, usually after education, then we see a decline in their social relationships, the amount of social relationships they have. And the more social relationships you have to start out with, I'm not saying many, but just a good handful of close social connections, the more you have of those, the better you're off later. So university is a critical time to get people to connect with each other and establish close relationships. But then how do you do that? How do people make friends? How do you make a friend? I want to challenge you. You got 1 week, go out and find a friend. It's not that simple, all right? But that's where we can learn a lot from children. These are fascinating, these creatures. Because observe what they do. Kindergarten, they start to play. Another one comes along, they play together. Suddenly they're friends because the activity does it. We have a lot of other approaches to doing this, like befriending schemes, and you try to pair people up, but it doesn't always work. It often doesn't work because you need several things to establish a friendship. You need some kind of similarity, similar interests. You need opportunity for social interaction, going to the same places. So you meet up, you see each other somewhere. And then you need something we can't really pinpoint exactly what it is, which is chemistry. Okay? That's why we can't just suddenly make friends. I can't just suddenly find one of you and say, I want to be friends with you. That doesn't work that way. But if we focus on activities, things that we're interested in, we meet someone somewhere, we go to a class, when you know there's shared interests, you know there's opportunity for interaction, and then you probably won't make friends with everyone in the room, but might there be just one person in the corner where you just have some chemistry, and that's where the magic happens. That's how you make a relationship. So in order to belong, we have to sort of focus on these other things to get that started. So, and these domains are not separate from each other. I mean, they're distinct sort of concepts, but they are interconnected. They're all part of the same thing. So we probably can't talk about them like being separate and different, as if we can do act and then we can do commit and then we can do belong. They all come together. Should we always do more of acting, belonging, and committing? This was an ad in Denmark, actually about stress. But it says that the hard choice between broccoli and eggplant was the final straw that broke the camel's back. He just collapsed there on the aisle, all right? And sometimes when we've been telling people about act, belong, commit, then they say, well, I do all these things. I'm involved, I do this and that. And now you're telling me I have to do more? And actually, we're not saying that, not at all. What we're saying is that if you're already doing a lot of things that are good for your mental health, well, keep doing them. Prioritize them. Okay? And if you do so much of exciting activities, activities that get you excited, so much that it becomes stress and it becomes harmful to your mental health, well, maybe you need to change some of these activities to something that makes you relax and get more in contact with yourself. Who knows? Maybe it's just every day, go for a walk, feed the ducks, something like that. Maybe it's that simple. And a dream is a wish your heart makes. Just to say that, well, people, they have to decide for themselves what is meaningful to engage in. And I think we shouldn't be paternalistic about act, belong, commit. We shouldn't walk around telling people, this is meaningful, you have to do that. We don't do that in act, belong, commit. But what we say, and this is very important, if you take anything away from my presentation, is this. It doesn't matter so much what the activity is. What matters is that it feels meaningful to the individual. It has to feel meaningful to the individual. And then choose with the heart. Don't try to do everything. Don't try to get involved with everything. Listen to your heart. So some implications of the Act, Belong, Commit. We are facilitating a new mindset about mental health. The ABC principles, they are relatively easy to remember. You say it a few times, Act, Belong, Commit, Act, Belong, Commit, you got it. It's like a song. Universal principles, meaning that they can be implemented to some degree, at least, by almost every individual, no matter what your situation is. They are intuitive principles, but not self-fulfilling. If they were self-fulfilling, we wouldn't have to go around campaigning about it. It's a non-pharmacological approach to mental health. I think that's important to also bring. It does not require trained health professionals. It's cost-effective because the needed resources are already in the community. The activities that are out there, the people that people can connect with, the courses that people can sign up for. So it's cost-effective. But of course, there's no such thing as free lunch. Everything costs money. A campaign, partnership also costs money. So I would like to humbly suggest to you that you also secure funding for it. ABC is not a substitute for mental health care, but can complement clinical treatment. And I would always say to someone who suffers from mental health problems, well, get your care that you need, but then also focus on this. It's important. It's empowering, gives people some tools they can use themselves, and it's destigmatizing. And then it's part of the solution. It's not the whole solution, but it's part of the solution. And we don't have to oversell it, because Act, Belong, Commit can do 1,000 good things. It can't solve structural inequalities in your society. We have to also focus on fixing these things. But maybe it can make better conditions for people that are in a worse situation. It can't solve gun violence in your country, but maybe it can be useful in preventing something like that from happening. Or maybe it can be useful in helping a community to heal after that kind of event. So, all right, I'm going to go to the past here, to the end, and just quote Van Gogh. I dream my paintings, then I paint my dreams. And I want to invite you to use this in your own life. Try to think about what would you like your life to be like? What contents, what people would you like to be part of it? Dream about it, reflect on it, and then go out and do it. Go out and realize it. Thank you.